Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sam Goodwin. I'm from UK Study Options and I'm the Head of Global Engagement. And today's session is all about understanding UK university fee status for expat parents, especially those living in Europe. We know after Brexit there's been many changes, so how does that affect you? And hopefully you'll get all the answers by the end of this session. Before we get started on talking about fee status, I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction into UK study options. So what makes us the experts? Why should you listen to me when it comes to UK university fee status and consider using our service to support your application? Well, myself and the full team at UK Study Options do have extensive experience with university admissions. We have worked in UK universities over 40 years of combined experience, so we have that insider knowledge when it comes to policies and processes. We are all university people. As well as our experience, we are fully trained on how to apply the fee status rules. You can see there a logo for UKISA. UKISA are the UK Council for International Student Affairs. They are a charity and they train all of the universities on how to assess fee status. And we sit alongside the universities, we receive exactly the same training. So with our experience, with our training, we have a really good success rate. Currently 99% of families that we support achieve a home outcome with their application. Because we are supporting hundreds of families each year, we are in a very unique position where we can see right across the UK at all the different universities, any changes to their policies, their processes, any trends that we can feed back to you, our current customers, to make sure you have the best chance of success. As far as we know, we are the only independent advisors on UK university fee status. And you can see there some logos of our credentials and our memberships. So we are members of COBIS and FOBISIA, which are British International School Associations. We are UCAS International Advisor Network members. We are also International ACAC members. And we also partner with GEMS Education, so GEMS schools in the Middle East. But if we start talking about fee status, and we'll start off looking at some fee status myths, because there is a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding about home fee eligibility. So it's really important to separate the myths from the facts, because that can really affect your preparation, your planning, and your chances of getting home fees if you get that wrong. So we're going to look at some myths, and hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll be really clear on why these are not correct. So myth number one, a British passport gets you home fees. Well, if you come along to today's session, hopefully you'll understand that a British passport in itself is not a guarantee of home fee status. Universities are going to be checking many other aspects of your circumstances to determine whether they can justify giving you home fees. In fact, you don't need to have a British passport. There are many groups of people that could be eligible for home fees without a British passport. Next myth, you have to live in the UK for 3 years to get home fees. Well, this is not correct. We support families from all around the world to show how they have maintained their eligibility. It's understandable why people may think this is the case, but the fee status rules actually refer to ordinary residents. And that is a legal term, and we're going to look at that in much more detail, but it is possible to be an ordinary resident in the UK, even though you might live outside of the UK on a day-to-day basis. As well, if you're living in Europe, you may be aware of some temporary protections under the Brexit withdrawal agreement that look at whether you should get home fees based on the fact that you are living or you're ordinarily resident in a European country. And we'll look closely at those in this session. Next myth, you can change to home fees if you become eligible during your degree. This is not the case for the vast majority of those applying to university in the UK, especially if you are a British citizen when you start your course. It's not possible to acquire or obtain eligibility during the course. Your eligibility is always linked to your circumstances on the first day of the first academic year of the course. So the tuition fees that are charged in the first year and that you can see in your offer letter are the fees that you'll pay for the entire duration of your course in year 2 and year 3. It's not possible to change. So if you believe that you are a home fee paying student, and you have been given overseas fees by the university, you need to challenge that and ask them to reconsider before you accept the offer, before you start the course, because it might not be possible after that. Next myth, if you are British and you live in Europe, then you are guaranteed to get home fees until 2027. I mentioned earlier these temporary rules after Brexit, and there is some misunderstanding about these rules, and it's not the case that you are guaranteed home fees until 2027. There are some technical requirements in these categories that you have to meet, and it could mean that some people don't get home fees. So really important to make sure you check and you can clearly see your eligibility and whether you can get home fees in that way. And finally, we don't have to worry about fee status until the UCAS application. Well, I really want to debunk this myth today because it is really important to think about your fee status as early as possible. Universities are going to be checking your circumstances for that full 3-year period before you start your course to make sure you've always maintained your eligibility. So you don't want to be leaving it until you're applying to UCAS, or even worse, when universities start questioning you and asking you for evidence. It could be too late by them to be able to successfully present your case for home fees. So really important, think about your fee status nice and early, ideally those 3 or 4 years before you start your university. If you are in Europe, you could be in a very difficult situation where you have one child starting under one set of rules, another child may be starting under a new set of rules if they're starting their university course after 2027. So again, prior planning and preparation could be crucial. So you do not want to leave it until the last minute before you apply to university. But we're going to talk briefly about who could be eligible for home fees, because after Brexit this has changed a lot in Europe. So let's be really clear on who possibly could get home fees. Now, there is a term in the rules and that is settled. And settled we are going to talk about a lot more detail later in the presentation. But essentially the main part of this is an immigration requirement. So it's talking about specific groups of people who have the right to live in the UK and stay in the UK without any restriction on their length of stay. So that could be a British citizen. It could also be someone from the Republic of Ireland who is a Republic of Ireland national. Also, if you have indefinite leave to remain or right of abode in the UK, you similarly don't have any restriction on your length of stay in the UK. Now, after Brexit, we also have the EU settlement scheme. So this scheme set up by the UK government to regularise the status of EU nationals living in the UK. So if you have settled status under the EU settlement scheme, again, that gives you this settled aspect of your circumstances in the UK. Now, with the EU settlement scheme, there are also provisions for those with pre-settled status. And importantly, when we're talking about being settled in the UK, there are also pathways for family members of these groups. So if the child, the student, is not a British national themselves, they could still get home fees if they have a parent or a grandparent or a spouse who can tick this box for them. Okay, so that's important to consider. And a relevant family member, a parent, could be a step parent or an adoptive parent. The big change after Brexit is that EU nationals, so EU passport holders without any of those connections to the UK, can no longer get home fees. They will be overseas fees. So the EU passport is not helpful on its own any longer to get the lower fees in the UK. Also, keep in mind that there are many categories of home fees. In this presentation, we'll only be focusing on a few of those categories, but there are other categories to provide for Ukrainian humanitarian schemes, other asylum seekers and refugees. So if you don't meet any of the requirements in the categories we talk about today, look into your own case. There might be other categories that could be eligible for you. But what is fee status? What are the basics when it comes to tuition fees in the UK at university? So all publicly funded universities in the UK need to distinguish between home fee payers and overseas fee paying students on their courses. And this is because for each home fee paying student that enrolls on their course, they are able to claim public funding from the government to help subsidise the cost of delivering the course to those students. This means that the home fees are capped by the government, currently around £9,500 per year. This means whatever course, whatever university you apply to as a home student, you won't pay more than those tuition fees. But there is no public funding for overseas fee-paying students. So overseas students pay much higher fees. The universities are passing on the full cost of delivering the course to those students in the form of tuition fees. So for every application they receive, universities are undertaking a fee status assessment to make sure they charge the correct fees to these students. For many people, this is done in the background. You won't even know it's happening. But if you're living outside of the UK, universities are likely to ask you for more information, send you complicated questionnaires to fill in, ask you to provide supporting evidence to help them make the decision on your fee status. With over 150 different universities in the UK, it is the case that some universities are stricter than others when it comes to interpreting the rules and making their policies in this regard. So this means that the university that you apply to could have an impact on your chances of getting home fees for your course. It is also the case that some courses, in some instances, your fee status can have a direct impact on even getting an offer on the course. And we'll look at a specific example of that later in the presentation. So universities are undertaking these fee status assessments and they are using rules set by the UK government, and this is under the devolved arrangement. So there are different rules in each of the UK nations. So England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales each have a different set of rules, and this also could be a complicating factor if you are applying from outside of the UK. So if you apply to a university in England under the English rules, you could be eligible for home fees, but if you apply to a university in Scotland under the different rules in Scotland, it could be that you are an overseas fee payer. The rules that the universities are using are problematic. They are very complex, they are very technical, and there's a lot of grey area in the rules. So there's a lot of areas where universities need to make their own judgment and use their discretion. And especially for expat families living outside of the UK, who are often considered to be on the borderline when it comes to whether or not you fit into one of these home fee categories, the result, the outcome could be very unpredictable, and it could also be inconsistent. So if you apply to 5 different universities with your UCAS application, it could be that some of those universities will decide that you are a home fee payer, and some of those universities will decide that you are an overseas fee payer. This just reflects the very subjective nature, discretionary nature of the assessment that universities are undertaking. It is perfectly legitimate under this process and under these rules that two universities looking at the same case could come to a different outcome on the fee status. So what happens if you don't get assessed as a home fee payer? Well, overseas fee paying students pay much higher tuition fees, anywhere between £36,000 and £423,000 in tuition fees. This is obviously a huge range, and it just reflects the fact that each university is setting their own fees for overseas fee paying students on their course. As well as these much higher tuition fees, as an overseas fee-paying student, you are not going to have access to student finance. These are restricted to home fee-paying students, so you're going to think about how you are going to fund the cost of studying in the UK to get your UK degree. But there is a wider context to fee status. It's not just the rules and how the universities apply the rules to your individual circumstances, but there's all these external factors that make a difference in how universities set their policies, how the government sets a policy about home fee eligibility, that change from year to year and could have an impact on your chances when you apply. It is very much a political and economic issue. We've seen recent events this year in 2025 that could impact on fee status, such as the Immigration White Paper, in which the government has proposed to apply a levy to higher education overseas tuition fee revenue. So effectively they're looking to tax universities on their international fee income. The proposal is 6%. Of course, if that comes in, we could see a big jump in the tuition fee levels for overseas fee-paying students. They could go up perhaps by 10% in a short amount of time. So as expatriate families, you are going to get caught up in this because potentially you could be classified as an overseas fee-paying student and suddenly again pay much higher tuition fees. Universities have been complaining for many years that the funding that they receive from the government for their home students is not enough to cover the cost of delivering the course to those students. So universities are effectively making a loss on every home student that enrolls in their course. So the universities are very keen to increase the number of international students on their course, and they are facing problems to be able to do this. The recent decisions by the government on immigration policy means that the UK is a less popular destination for international students, and there are some forecasts that international student numbers are dropping by up to 30% in this academic year, which is a big problem for universities. So all of these factors mean that universities are often looking to tighten and restrict their policies on who can get home fees, making it tougher for these borderline cases, expatriate families. So again, it's really crucial to prepare and plan and make sure you have the best case possible when you apply to university to maximise your chance of getting home fees. So let's look more closely at these provisions in the rules after Brexit. Now, in England, this category is called the Brexit Temporary Offer category, and it offers protections to British nationals living in Europe up until 2027. Now, crucially, there are some important technical requirements in these rules that you do need to make sure that you meet, because it could be possible that if you make an assumption about your eligibility in this category, you could get caught out. So really important not to get caught out with these rules. So let's look at these key points. Firstly, you must be a British national. Additionally, you must have been ordinarily resident in the EEA or Switzerland on the 31st of December 2020. And since that time, you have been ordinarily resident in the EEA or Switzerland, or it is acceptable for you to have moved to the UK in that time. Additionally, you must be commencing your course before 2028 and studying that course in the UK. So this is not applicable to distance learning courses. So immediately we can see that there are going to be some people who are not covered by this provision. So anyone that moved to the EEA or Switzerland after 2020 is not covered. You are not covered under the Brexit withdrawal agreement. So if you only established your ordinary residence in Europe after that time, then you are not going to be able to use your residence in Europe as the chance to get home fees in the UK. Additionally, of course, if you are starting your course after 2027, these temporary rules will no longer exist for those starting university. So that is the temporary nature of these provisions. So there's a couple of groups of people there that will not be covered by this provision. So we'll have to look at an alternative way to get home fees at a university in the UK. But what about Scotland? We talked before about the fact that there are different rules in each of the UK nations, and in Scotland there's some extra requirements to keep in mind. In Scotland, they still have free tuition for Scottish home students. That means when you are a Scottish student applying to a Scottish university, the most that you'll pay in tuition fees is £1,820 per year on the small number of courses that do charge fees to home students. However, they also have a middle rate of fees, so we'll look at that in a minute. But if you're living in Europe, can you get home fees? Well, yes, you can, if you meet all those provisions on the previous slide, plus if you were living in Scotland for 3 years before moving to the EEA or Switzerland, then you'll be classed as a Scottish returner, and you'll be in line to be considered for those Scottish home fees when you apply to a Scottish university. We talked about the middle rate of fees, that is rest of UK or RUK fees. So if you are originally from England, Wales or Northern Ireland, then you can be considered for RUK fees, and they are £9,535, so the equivalent of home fees that you would pay in England. Now, it is possible to be considered for RUK fees if you are a British national living in Europe. Let's look at how you could do that. So if you lived in England, Wales or Northern Ireland before you moved to the EEA or Switzerland, or if you have never lived in the UK before your residence in Europe. So perhaps you were born in France, you've lived your whole life in France, but you're a British national, it is possible that you can be considered for RUK fees under the Scottish rules. But for RUK fees, there's a really crucial requirement not to overlook here. The rules say that you must be ordinarily resident in Scotland by the relevant date. Now, the relevant date is the 1st of August, which is the first day of the academic year. So, for instance, if you are starting your university course in 2026, you would need to be ordinarily resident in Scotland by the 1st of August 2026. This is irrespective of when your course actually starts. It might start later in August or even maybe the start of September. That doesn't matter. You need to be ordinarily resident in Scotland by the 1st of August. And importantly, you must be able to demonstrate that you are not moving to Scotland for the purpose of starting your university course. So the rules say that if you are wholly or mainly moving to Scotland for education to start your course, then you do not qualify. You must be ordinarily resident for another reason in Scotland. So this is likely to be a problem for many people who live in Europe and will be accepting an offer and move to Scotland to start their university course. It could be very difficult for you to be able to meet this requirement. It is obviously going to be quite a subjective and perhaps discretionary assessment each university will make on this. So there is going to be an element of uncertainty on whether you can meet this part of the requirement. So really important consideration if you live in Europe and you're looking to apply to a Scottish university. But let's look now at some illustrative examples of the difference between a home fee payer and an overseas fee paying student on a UK degree. And this first example is studying a medicine degree at an English university. So we are in England under the specific rules in England. And if we look at the tuition fees, we can see for home students, you are paying £9,535 per year. That is the capped amount. Whatever course, whatever university you apply to, a home student, you won't pay more than that, even on a medical course. But for overseas students, you can see on the right-hand side, much higher tuition fees, up to £70,554 per year. That up to is important. There are medical degrees you can study in England that charge fees less than that. You may find a university that is charging £40,000 or £50,000 per year, but currently the most expensive is at Cambridge University, where you'll be paying £70,000. These are 2025 figures. Just a quick tip here: when you are applying to a university for a medical degree, do check the duration of the course. Some medical degrees in England can be 5 years in length. At Cambridge, it's actually a 6-year course. So really important to understand how many years you are going to be paying these tuition fees for. But if you look now at student loan, you can see this is on a different basis. So for home students, yes, you can apply for student finance from the government to help you with these costs. I would point out here that it is not guaranteed. It will be a separate application and a separate assessment made by Student Finance England or the relevant student loan company. But if you successfully established your eligibility for home fees at the university, you are likely to be in a good position to argue your eligibility for loan purposes in terms of your home status. But these are not available for overseas fee-paying students. They are reserved for home students. So if you're an overseas fee-paying student, again, you are going to need to look at alternative funding for your tuition fees and your living costs while you're studying in the UK. And finally, if we look at admission, this is again different. So if you're a home student, it's competitive. We know that medical degrees in England are oversubscribed. It can be tough to get that place on the course. But for overseas students, it's different again, very competitive. And this is because for medicine, dentistry and veterinary courses, these are known as competitive entry courses, and the government has actually placed a cap on the number of places that universities can offer to overseas fee-paying students on this course. So if you get classified as an overseas fee-paying student on one of these courses, you will be competing for just 7% of places on that course. For many medical schools in England, this could be single-digit number of places. So immediately, your chances of getting an offer could be much lower. The entry requirements, the grades you need to meet to get one of these very small number of places reserved for overseas fee-paying students could be higher. So this is an example where your fee status could have a direct impact on whether or not you even get an offer of a place on the course. But if we look now at a different example, and if we look now at a business degree at a Scottish university. So we are in Scotland under a different set of rules in Scotland. You can see there again the two levels of tuition fees in the home column. Home fees for Scottish universities, a maximum of £1,820 per year. Our UK fees, if you're from the rest of the UK, £9,535 per year. But again, much lower than what you'll pay as an overseas fee-paying student. You can see there up to £32,000 per year. You can find business degrees in Scotland where you're studying for less than that as an overseas fee-paying student, but currently the most expensive is at St Andrews University. Another quick tip here when applying to Scottish universities, do check the duration of the course. Some undergraduate courses can be 4 years in length, so really important not to get caught out there for budgeting purposes. But if we look at student loan, again, it's on the same basis as the previous example. They are available for home students, not guaranteed, but a good chance that you can get that support with the costs of your study. These are not available to overseas fee-paying students. They are reserved for home students. And finally, in this example, the admission is on the same basis. So it doesn't matter whether you get assessed as a home fee payer or an overseas fee paying student. In terms of your chances of getting an offer on the course, it's not too competitive. So depending on which university that you apply to in Scotland, a little bit easier to get that place rather than a medical degree. But let's look more closely now at the rules and what the rules actually say about home fee eligibility. And we are now talking about a category that is relevant to expatriate families living outside of the UK. So this would be especially relevant to any families living in Europe who are not covered by those Brexit withdrawal agreements. So if you cannot use your actual residence in Europe to claim home fees, then you need to look at this alternate category. So perhaps you only moved to Europe after 2020. So if you've moved in the last few years, or if your child is starting their university course after 2027, then these are the rules you are likely to need to meet in order to get the lower home fees. And there's a few requirements in this category of the rules. Firstly, you must be settled in the UK when you start your university degree. Additionally, you must be ordinarily resident in the UK for the full 3-year period before the start of the university course. Or if you're not ordinarily resident in the UK for that period, you still get home fees if you are just temporarily absent from the UK for some specific temporary employment. So let's look at some of those key terms in more detail. So settled, what does settled mean? It means both ordinarily resident and having no restriction on your length of stay in the UK. So we're going to look at ordinary residence next, but as before, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, this is this immigration requirement, and we talked about those groups of people that can meet this requirement. So if you're a British national, an Irish national, indefinite leave to remain, right of abode in the UK, settled status under the EU settlement scheme, you have no restriction on your length of stay in the UK. Remember also, a relevant family member can tick this box for the student. So a parent or a grandparent, if the child themselves is not a British national. But everyone needs to meet the next requirement, which is the ordinary residence requirement. And this is the really tricky one because there is actually no definition under the rules of what is ordinary residence. So this is an area that universities have to use their discretion, make their own judgments. Many will have their own specific policy on how they are going to assess ordinary residence. But an accepted definition of ordinary residence is having a regular, habitual mode of life in a particular place for a settled purpose. And under the fee status rules, this is always assessed over the 3-year period before the start of the university course. So you don't need to be living in the UK, but you do need to demonstrate to universities how you have this regular, habitual mode of life for them to be able to justify giving you home fees on that basis. But we also know that if you don't have this ordinary residence in the UK, you still get home fees if you are just temporarily absent. So if you are temporarily working abroad, you will be treated as though you are ordinarily resident in the UK. So a classic example of this could be a case of a British family living in the UK. A parent gets seconded or assigned or posted by their employer to work at an office abroad. And if you can show to the university that if it wasn't for the fact that you are doing this specific time-limited employment outside of the UK, you would be living at your ordinary home in the UK, the university should consider giving you home fees on that basis. There's one further part of the rules that I just wanted to make you aware of, and that is the main purpose test. Now, the main purpose test particularly affects families that have a child at boarding school in the UK. The main purpose test says that the main purpose for residence in the UK must not have been to receive full-time education. If that's the case, then this actual residence in the UK does not count towards getting home fees at a UK university. Now, this particularly affects families with a child at boarding school in the UK. If a child is at boarding school and their parents live outside of the UK, the university are likely to apply this main purpose test, and they will take the view that if the child wasn't at school in the UK, where would they be living? Normally with their parents outside of the UK. A child who is under 18, a minor, is not independent of their parents. So the legal precedent is that they are not able to independently have their own residency status that's linked to where the parents are living. So that's really important to consider. Boarding school in the UK is not a guarantee of home fees. It is a complicating factor in your case, and you will still need to plan and prepare and be ready to show your eligibility that as a family you continue to have an ordinary residence in the UK, or that otherwise you are only temporarily absent from the UK. There's a quote here from UKISA. If you remember, UKISA are the people that train the universities on how to assess fee status, and they have a lot of useful information and guidance on their website. And in their guidance, that they say that you, as in the student, might have to persuade an institution that you meet this requirement. And UKISA are acknowledging here that universities have a really difficult job to interpret these very complex rules and apply them to everyone's individual circumstances. So you can't assume that a university will be able to identify you as a home fee payer. You are going to need to know the rules, how you fit into the rules, because you might need to persuade or convince up to 5 different universities of why you should get home fees. Even if your case is more straightforward and you can get home fees based on your residence in a European country, you might have to point this out to the university and show evidence of how you meet the requirements. So always necessary to be prepared for this. So how can you prepare for fee status? What are some top tips to get home fees at a UK university? Well, number one, consider your eligibility as early as possible. Really crucial. Don't delay. Don't leave it until the UCAS application, or even worse, when the university starts to question your eligibility. You want to be making sure you have maintained your eligibility and met the requirements for that full 3-year period before the start of the university course. And of course, with our service and our support for parents, this is what we are planning to do. We want to work with families 3 or 4 years before the start of the UK university, so that you are in the best position to argue your case for home fees and maximise your chances when you apply. Do remember, it's important to maintain an ordinary residence in the UK for that full 3-year period. So if you're not covered by the Brexit withdrawal agreements, you're not able to use the category showing your eligibility through an ordinary residence in Europe, you need to show this in the UK. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, universities will be looking for a home base address. They want to see that you have a permanent family home that is available and accessible for you to use for this regular habitual life in the UK that you need to show. Additionally, they will be asking you about your travel pattern back to the UK, and they will want to see that you go back regularly each year to show that it reflects that it is your ordinary home and that you spend long enough and go often enough to have this habitual everyday life there. Also, where possible, you want to keep your absence as temporary as possible. So especially when it comes to your employment, if you have a fixed term contract, if you have an end date, if you have been seconded by your employer to work outside of the UK, these could be useful things to show to the university for your eligibility. Do remember, you need to build your case and gather evidence. This is really crucial. So there's not one single thing that is going to make sure, guarantee that you get home fees. Remember, each university has their own policy. Each university will be interpreting the rules in different ways. So What might work for one university will not work for another university. What one university might be asking you for could be different to what another university is asking you for. So when we work with families and support families, we want to help build and strengthen your case so it can withstand the scrutiny, whatever university you apply to, and so that you have the chance of getting home fees no matter which university you choose. This is really crucial because just having one piece of evidence that you rely on could be a very risky strategy, and it could mean that your chance of getting home fees at some universities could be very low. Do also remember that you can appeal against an overseas offer. There is no one else going to do this for you. There's no oversight, there's no one checking that the decisions universities are making on fee status are correct. So if you get an offer from a university with overseas fees and you believe that you are a home fee payer, it is up to you to challenge that, to ask them to reconsider through the internal appeals process that every university has. But of course, if you're asking them to overturn their decision and make a new decision, you will need to have evidence and documentation to support and back up your claims. And then finally, do get personalised specialist advice. It's really easy to make an assumption about your eligibility that is incorrect. So often people will see what others have achieved. They will make assumptions based on what older siblings have achieved and what the process was when the elder child applied. But we see it all the time that when a younger sibling applies, they could have a very different experience and process and decisions when it comes to the fee status. Every application is unique, so if you are relying on assumptions on your own eligibility based on what friends and family have achieved, it is a very risky strategy and you could run into trouble. There is a lot of hidden eligibility out there that you may not be aware of. So you may not even realize that you are eligible for home fees under certain categories of the rules, and you don't want to be paying these much higher overseas fees unnecessarily. So this is where, of course, we can help. We can give you that specialized personal advice on your own case. And we have a 3-step process here to help families understand their eligibility and support them and maximize their chances of home fees when they apply to university in the UK. So the first step is our online fee status checker. This is an online tool on our website you can use quickly and easily to get an instant update about your potential eligibility for home fees. You enter your details, answer a few yes or no questions, and you'll get this summary emailed to you with lots of useful information, links and resources, and recommendations for next steps. And if you are potentially eligible for home fees, we will invite you to book into our fee status appraisal service. And this is where we will take a detailed look at your own circumstances. So exactly what the universities will do when you apply to them, we will undertake a fee status assessment and give you a detailed report of your eligibility and what we think your chances of home fees, perhaps some strengths and weaknesses of your case, and understand exactly which category you could be eligible under. Now, if you are potentially eligible for home fees, you can then move on to step 3, which is our fee status support service. And this is where we support families to maximize their chances of home fees, maintain your eligibility right up in the lead up to the application. And we know that this can save thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds in tuition fees. If you've got a budding medic in your family, if you've got more than one child applying to university in the UK, the difference between home fees and overseas fees can be in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. As well as this, we know families with our support can get that peace of mind, reduce stress at that all-important exam period. So we know a well-prepared, well-argued case for home fees can speed up offers from the universities. You can get the fee status resolved, get that offer in the bag, hopefully avoid going back and forth with universities or perhaps going through lengthy appeals processes. and just concentrating on getting the best results in the exam and choosing the best offer for you. You will get comprehensive, personalized support. We will look at a detailed checklist of evidence that you will need to provide. We'll look at what other evidence you already have that could be useful for your application, and an action plan of steps to take to build and strengthen and have the best possible case when you apply. You can also benefit from our insight and experience in dealing with universities all across the UK, so you can understand your chances at individual universities and help prepare for that application even more. And of course, as soon as the application is submitted, when you are receiving queries, complicated questionnaires, forms to fill in, if you need to submit appeals, we do all of that for you. You're not left to do any of that on your own. So in terms of next steps, what can you do? That QR code on the screen will take you to our website, to our fee status checker, which is a great place to get started. To learn more, if you're interested, whether you could be eligible for home fees, or if you are looking to get our support with your application, start with our fee status checker and it will direct you to the next steps in the process. Also on our website, you can find lots more information, useful blog articles, informative videos. I would really encourage you to have a look at the testimonials from families that we've supported previously. We've got a whole lot of Google reviews, and you can see how our support has helped families just like yours before. There's links to all our social media channels as well, so you can stay updated on all our activities, any changes in the rules perhaps over the coming years before you apply to university as well. So I hope this session was really beneficial for you. We look forward to hearing from you and supporting you with your application to university.